This is Computer Science 1213, Introduction to Computing. My name is Chris Rule, and this is the video on Intro to Loops. On the first page of the worksheet, you have a set of Java code. We see this on the right here. You have X's and Y's and Z's and A's, all these different variables that are all integers. And it looks, frankly, kind of messy, and they want you to say what's going on through answering a series of questions. As I looked at this, I thought of a previous worksheet on tracing, which identifies how variables change as they go through the program. So I wanted to use that idea for this particular set of code. So I drew this table listing all the variables on the left, and then section 1, 2, and 3 to correspond to section 1, 2, and 3 listed in the code. As I go through this, I'll put in the values, the initial values, and then how they change. So right here, I can start by putting in a 1 because X is equal to 1. And then Y is equal to 2. So I'll put in a 2 for Y, although I don't want it marked out just yet. And then the third line says Y equal X. And as you know, the first becomes the second. So Y will become whatever X is. X is a 1, so Y is not a 2 anymore, so I'll mark that out. And then over here, Y becomes a 1. And then the fourth line, X becomes whatever Y is. So X is no longer this 1, but now it becomes the one from Y. After I go through the code, whatever X and Y are, the last numbers that aren't marked out, that will be the answers over here, where it asks you for the value of X and Y in these comments. In the next section, we have X and Y, and then Z becomes something, and then Y becomes something else, and X becomes something else, and it asks you for X and Y again. Then in the final section, we have Z set to 2, and then things happen to Z. Then we have A equal to A plus 1, and it asks you for the value of Z and A. So using this tracing table, I think you'll be able to do these others on this page. Now keep in mind that a variable has to be set to something initially. So X is 1, Y is 2. Here Z is Y, but Z becomes whatever Y is in this second one. Before you can do anything with it on the right side, you have to do something with it on the left side. Keep that in mind as you attempt to answer question 5 on the first page. Now moving on from Model 1 to Model 2, we have a set of commands written in Alice involving a falcon, and I want to replicate those in the code so you can see how they're done and what they mean. So on page 2 of Intro Loops handout under Model 2, we have a whole number equal x arrow 0. That is a variable definition. And there's a control at the bottom of the screen that says variable. And I'm going to drag it up into the coding area. And I get this box, this dialog box. I'm going to pick whole number for the type, which is the same as integer. I'm going to put in x for the variable, and I'm going to put in 0 as the initializer or the initial value, and then click OK. And when I do, that looks like the line on the paper. The next item is a while loop. There's a control at the bottom that says while, so I'll drag it up there, and when I take my finger off the mouse button, this box comes up and says, well, do you want it while it's true or while it's false? We're going to change it so it doesn't really matter, but I'll pick true. So while true is true, this loop will continue. If I put any statements in here and run this thing, actually I probably don't even need statements. If I just run it now, true is always true, so it will never stop out of this loop. So I've got to change this thing. Now, on the paper, it has while x is less than, has a less than sign there, less than 3 is true. Well, all I had before was true and false, but now if I click on the down arrow, I have a lot of options. And I want to find something that has that less than sign. So as I move down through my choices, the first relational choice has a less than sign. But notice it's beside something that says decimal number. And that's a floating point number. But mine is a whole number. So I'm going to move down to the next one. I'm going to pick whole number. And this is something to keep in mind, because if I go over here and look, there's no x on the decimal number one. But if I go to whole number and go to less than, there is an x, because x is a whole number. That'll be the number on the left, and then the less than sign, and you pick the number on the right, which in our code is a 3. And that's how we produce this line. While x is less than 3 is true. As long as this expression is true, do whatever's inside this while loop, from the word while to the word loop. So what we want to do next is have the Falcon say something. So we're on the Falcon. Here's the say statement. Pull it up. And all I can do now is put in some text. So I'm going to type in custom text and say the number is, and with a space at the end, and click OK. Now that's not everything I need. I also need it to say plus x, but that wasn't an option. But now if I click on the number is part, I can scroll down here to the number is plus something else. And when I go across, I have to define what type of variable I want to add to it, which is a whole number, and then choose x. That gives me the next line in the code. The only other line in the while loop is an assign statement, and this is very important. Anytime you do a loop with a counter, you need to set that counter to increase or get closer to the limit each time it goes through the loop. So I drug the assign control up here, and it defaults to x, becomes, from this arrow here, and I'm going to pick X. You can't do it all at once. You have to do a little bit at a time. So this is X becomes X, but I want X plus 1. Now if I click down on the X on the right side, I have an option to do math. And with the math, I can take X and add 1 to it. Now it's X becomes X plus 1. But I don't need it there. I need it in my loop, so I'm going to move it up. That needs to be in the loop. Now, once the loop ends, we're going to have the Falcon say goodbye. And that's the code. So let's run the code. I'm going to make it big and restart it. Number is 0, the number is 1, the number is 2, goodbye. How many steps was that? Did you count? Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, we had 4 statements. 3 of them were up here in this loop, and 1 was outside the loop down here. Number 7 on your paper asks the question, what must the value of the Boolean expression be in order for the first print statement to execute? Now the first print statement is this one here, the Falcon say. Print statements are say statements. So it's this one and this one down here. Well, X is starting off as 0. So right here when we hit the while, we're saying 0 is less than 3 is true, which it is true. 0 is less than 3. So the Falcon will say the number is 0. And then it will increase X by 1. We can have other Boolean symbols in here. We could do less than or equal to, not equal to, greater than or equal to. There's many different options in our program, and you can find those in the reading on Booleans. In our case, X starts out at 0, then it becomes 1 down here, we go through it again, then it becomes 2, we go through it again, and when it becomes 3, we come back up here and it says 3 is less than 3 is true. Well, that's not true anymore. 3 is not less than 3. 3 is equal to 3. So in that case, these lines inside the loop will not execute, and the program will drop down here and say the Falcon says goodbye. And that's the end of the program. The increment statement means the statement where the counter increases by 1, which is the second line in the loop. Whatever X is, increase it by 1. Now we go to the third page of the worksheet. It says on number 9, what happens to the value of the variable X during the execution of the loop? Well, I think we've answered that already. Number 10, explain why the while loop does not execute after the Falcon says the number is 2. Well, I think we answered that as well. Now number 11 says reverse the order in the body of the while loop. So what we're going to do is take this counter and move it up. It's still inside the while loop, but now the counter comes first, which is not good practice, by the way. And the say statement is after it. Let's run this. Remember, we had 4 say statements by the Falcon. So let's see how many we have now. The number is 1, the number is 2, the number is 3, goodbye. Well, that's 4 statements. That's the same number of statements that we had before. But the statements are a little bit different. Let's rerun it again. The number is 1, the number is 2, the number is 3, goodbye. When we did it previously, we started with 0. We said the number is 0, the number is 1, the number is 2, and then it said goodbye. So by flipping those 2 lines, we changed what was being said. That answers A. How does the order impact what is printed by the program? Let's take a look at the code. We start out with X being 0. And then when we go into the loop, the first thing we do is increase X by 1. So now it's 1. And then the Falcon says something. And we go back up. 1 is still less than 3. So now we change it to 2. We're not really doing anything with X when it compares to the while up here at the top, because the first thing that happens is we increase it by 1. So we get different say statements. Now 11b says, does the order impact the number of lines that are printed? We had 4 originally, 4 say statements by the Falcon, and we still have 4. The Falcon just says something different. On the last 2, it may take you some time. Think about 3 different ways to modify the code so that the loop only executes twice. How could that happen? And then number 13, describe the 3 parts of the while loop that control the number of times a while loop executes. What controls it? The number of times a while loop executes. So you can try those 2, see how you do. And that concludes the worksheet on Intro to Loops.